Hello everyone, this is Nick for PokerVIP.com, otherwise known as Crazy Cookie on the PokerVIP forums. And today I'm going to be doing episode 3 of my Learn to Crush 15 minutes at a time series. And today we're going to be using Combonator to look at a spot as the PFR where we can use an exploitative strategy to maximize our EV. In the last episode, we took a spot and kind of created a fairly unexploitable betting range on the flop. And that's really important for a lot of situations, but I think even more important is taking the opportunities where we can exploit villain's range to maximize our EV. So as I said, last episode was on a GTO estimate exercise. It's not really GTO estimate, I suppose. It was the best way I could really describe it. It's more making sure that you've created a strategy which no one can really exploit you massively at, and if they do, then you know they're probably doing something a little bit out of the ordinary. But I think importantly, if you haven't watched episode 1, go and find it now. Maximizing your 15 minutes EV. That episode will pretty much teach you how to go through each of these episodes in the best way, how to go from one exercise to another, and really how to track your performance and see where you get to. So I think that's a really important one to look back over. But today we're going to be using Combonator and Flopzilla. I'm not going to go through where you can get these from because I did in the last episode. So if you want to find out more, go on to episode 2 and you can see where to download Combonator and Flopzilla and the costings, etc. But for today, we are going to jump in and see what we can do. So for those of you who like the 15-minute countdown, I can confirm that's going to be a feature for the whole series. I think it makes it a much more realistic challenge for me to make these videos this way, and it's a little bit more exciting as well. So I've got Flopzilla here, and this is my suggested range for calling versus a mid-position open. This will, of course, change throughout my session, depending on who I'm playing against, how I'm playing, and a number of other things. But, you know, if you sit down at an anonymous table, I tend to use this range. Yours may be slightly different, and you may want to assign a slightly different range to your opponents. But for now, we're going to use this range. So we're going to look at this spot here, where hero opens in mid-position, and the flop comes ace 10-4, and the big blind is the only person to have called pre-flop. So without further ado, let's start the countdown and see what we can do in 15 minutes. So last week, or in the last episode, we looked at heroes range and what the sort of like the best way to construct our betting range was, looking at our value range, our semi-bluffs, and our bluffs. This time we're going to look at villain's range and begin to determine how often he's going to fold, and therefore whether we're best to begin c-betting a lot of our bluffs or not. This is a board which I expect we probably will see quite a lot of our bluffs betting it, but it's important to go through and see exactly why, and it's a strategy and the way I study, which I use on a number of different boards, and this is just going to be an example. So in group 1, I'm going to include all of villain's nutted hands, so that's 10s, ace 10, and pocket 4s. We can see that he doesn't really have too many nutted combos, so straight away we should be alert to the idea that this is going to be a board which we should begin betting on with quite high frequency. Already we're getting that indication just because he doesn't have the nuts very often. If we look at the rest of his range, sort of like the ace the ace x hand, so top pair plus or just top pair, you can see that now we are getting some sort of a range, but even now, he's got only 21.5% of his range consists of top pair or better. So it's already looking very good to be betting on a lot. Group 3, I'm going to put his second pair combos. I'm expecting these to call at least on the flop. And we're now starting to see a few more calls, but we're still, looking at up to 70% folds potentially. And in group 4, I'm going to put in his Broadway combos. And in fact, in group 2, I'm going to put, of course, queens and jacks because they're going to be check calling the flop. And queens is close between a 3-bet and a call. It will depend on your games. You can take queens out of this range, fine. And then finally, just to make it a little bit less profitable on the flop for us, I guess we're going to have to throw in when he has a backdoor flush draw and some kind of backdoor equity as well. So when he has a club, a diamond, or a heart, and he has this sort of like king 9, queen 9, jack 9. I think that they are potential calls just because there are quite a few decent turn cards for them to continue on, but I don't think that calling them is going to be massively better than folding. And to be honest, a lot of people play poorly enough out of position that folding would just be a much higher EV than calling and trying to do something clever. But if we take this range and if we put in one last combo, and let's make that pocket 9s, or one last set of combos, which is pocket 9s, just to give villain when he does call with a pocket pair worse than 10s. I don't think they're going to do it too much in this board. 9s probably absolutely fine. You know, one time they may do it. So we can now see that we've got 65 or nearly 66% of combos are going to continue, and 34% of combos are going to fold. Now, those of you who can do math real quickly, you can pretty much see that a half pot bet, therefore, is automatically going to be profitable if we have 0% equity. So if you somehow have, I don't know, 6-7 off in your opening range, or 6-7 suited, which we probably will do, without a backdoor flush draw, you can bet that profitably on the flop. So we've straight away got the green light that this is a board we want to be bluffing on with pretty much our entire range. But I'm going to take it a step further today and begin looking at the turn and the river, because this is cool, and you can go down the very simple route saying I'm going to bet everything on the flop, and then on the turn and the river I'm going to become a little bit more value orientated. But what I think is really important here is to see exactly how villain's range begins to respond on the turn, and look at like the strong points and the weak points of it. So if we now take this range of this grouped range, and I'm not going to include check raises on this board because I don't think you'll have many. To create a quote-unquote balanced check raising range, he could include like 4s and pocket 10s along with king queen, for example, or king jack if he has that. I've not included king jack off. Some people may include that in the calling range, but that may be a balanced check raising range. But honestly, I don't think check raising 4s or 10s is a higher EV than just check calling. So it's probably best to just check call those anyway. So we can now again go through the same process, and I'll put in here 5 of, I don't know, clubs to give us a backdoor, a flush draw now, to begin to see, okay, what combos does villain have now that are likely to fold. So if we again put in group 1 his nutty combos, and he may begin check raising these. I think this would be a good enough spot to begin check raising ace 10, pocket 4s and 10s. So that becomes an issue we'll look at. But again, we're looking at this sort of like this ace jack. He can't have the nut flush draw with top pair because it's the ace of clubs. So that's something to remember as well here. And we can see that, well, 67% of the time, villain doesn't have top pair. This doesn't mean 6-7% of the time we're going to get some folds. We will now put in the king 10, queen 10, jack 10. It lets us do that. Thank you. So the 10x become quite close. I'd probably expect him to fold part of this range here. So what I'll do is I'll give this a rating actually of 50%. We'll give this 50%. Can we do that? Yes, we can. No, we can't. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll drop the weaker 10x. So we'll say equals queens and jacks again, and then jack 10 plus. I don't think it's all that likely to actually even call that all of the time, but we'll put it in there anyway. And then the next part, and the final part of his range, I'm going to include when he has a flush draw. And I think this is a really important one to look at, because you'll see that other than when he has the second pair on a flush draw, he only has, what's this, like 8 combos? Is that right? 2, 4, 6, 8 combos of flush draws, which is the same amount of his nutty combos, and he doesn't have very many of them. So we can see now, straight away on the turn, once again, a half pot bet is automatically going to be profitable, and that's if he begins calling jack 10 and queen 10, which some people will, some people won't. So a half pot bet is definitely going to be profitable. And if you were to take out the 5 of clubs and it will say the 5 of spades, a complete blank, well, you can just get rid of group 4 here. And to be honest, queen jack suited is not going to be a profitable check call in this spot. And now we have 45% folds. So on a completely blank turn, we have a fantastic opportunity here to double barrel with, again, pretty much our entire range and be very profitable with it. In terms of sizing, you can go almost to a pot size bet here with no equity and be profitable. And the really cool thing is, when we look at our own range, which I have over here, I believe. Let's have a look. When we look at our own range, you can see our nutted combos. We actually have a lot more of them than villain. I mean, 9% of our range is nutted on the flop. And then our stronger hands as well. Like we have more ace king, we have ace queen, and ace. So our value range here is actually crushing villain's calling range. 25% of the time on this flop, we've made a hand which is going to be, beating well, we'll get rid of ace jack. At nearly 20% of the time, we have a hand that beats the vast majority of villains' calling range, the top of their calling range. So we can actually here begin betting pot with, all of these kind of hands and then a ton of our bluffs and know that villain can't do anything because he's folding too much for that pot size bet to be a really negative EV bet anyway. We're going to make money from it. And the fact that our range will include these really strong combos makes it very, very difficult for our opponent to actually make any money. Now, that is, of course, more of a balanced solution, but it's important to see that we can begin betting pot with a huge portion of our range if we choose to, and make a lot of money. Quickly have a look at the river spot. So we'll keep this 5 of spades so it's completely dry, and we'll look at the river. And this is a situation here where a lot of people, they get to the river and they begin to think, well, villain must have ace X a ton of the time here. So triple barreling this board, people, without really looking into it, probably think, he just has an ace and he's going to call. Well, let's see if that's actually the case. If we give him anything that's likely to continue on a blank, we can see here we're going to get at least 40% folds. And of course, he could have check raised 4s and 10s on the turn. So if we actually say here, if we get rid of 4s and 10s, we can now see that the easy check calls, ace X here, only make up 55% of his range. So again, we can go with a massive overbet, over 1.5 times pot bet here. With all of our with a ton of our bluffs and all of our nutted combos, and we're going to make a ton of money here simply because villain is going to be folding enough, and we have the strong combos as well. And if we're being honest, if we bet 1.5 times pot, ace 9 and ace jack become very, very uncomfortable. It's a very easy way to exploit villain. If you bet 2x pot, 3x pot, if you were to shove all in here, which I think would be, a fine strategy here. If you shoved it all in with a range of, say, ace king, and then ace, and then all of our sets and 2 pairs, assuming that villain will check raise some of those combos on the turn, we're going to be in a situation where we're just absolutely crushing our opponent. When he calls, because we beat the vast majority of his calling range anyway, even if we include ace jack, and then we can use a huge amount of bluffs here. We're looking at using anything. I mean, we'll just put in some random cards and see where we get to with this. Maybe get out the 10 because they can all checkbacks. But I mean, you're probably looking at something like this part of a range. Yeah, this is 2/3. So you could use this as a bluffing range with a shove on the river probably. I'm not going to go into the maths now because there's not a huge amount of time left, and I think it's kind of pointless to do so. But if we shove this range here, with the red hands being our value hands, make up about 21%, and our bluffs making up about 80%, we can see that a shove is likely to will profit anyway because we're getting folds, 50% of the time or so. And when we do get a call, well, 20% of the time we win as well. So 80% maybe, too much of a portion of bluffs. Maybe it's best to go with something like this, or we drop these combos because they don't block like ace queen. So it could be a case of saying, well, okay, 25% or 25%. Something if we have 27% value combos here, you're going to be making a ton of money. So to wrap this up, the whole point of this exercise here is to look at our opponent's range and to estimate how often he's going to fold on the flop, turn, and river. And we saw that on this particular board, he folded enough on the flop to make most of our bets profitable, and that was with our no equity hands. That's when we had 6-7 suited without a backdoor flush draw. And even that has a small amount of equity, like about 1%, I suppose, against ace 10. Does it have that? Yeah, it probably will do. So even against our opponent's strongest hand, a hand like 6-7 is going to be profitable because it gets enough folds. And then when you include the fact that we have a stronger range than him, when our value range is wider and stronger than our opponent's, we'll get to a point where we can be betting pretty much everything on the flop. We might want to check back some of our weaker ace X and our 10x, but you know, you could probably make a case for making those profitable as well. It just might be more profitable to check back. But you can quite easily see that betting everything on the flop, which is not a balanced GTO strategy, is going to be profitable. And then when we got to the turn, we again saw that we were still going to get close to 40% fold. So again, you could be betting pretty much everything. And on the river, we found that if you want to take a strategy where you make a huge bet on the river, pot or 1.5 times pot, you're probably going to get these hands to fold as well. And as long as you do that as well, and this is really important, as long as you do that as well with our really strong combos, there is no way that our opponent can make money. We've completely exploited the fact that his range is dominated by non-top pair combos. And we have a really good opportunity to make a lot of money in these kind of spots. There will, of course, be situations where our opponent, where there'll be some turns and rivers which aren't as good for us. If, for example, the jack of clubs or the jack of diamonds or hearts came, it's a less favourable card for us. But because we will have backdoor flush draws and a hand like pocket jacks and ace jack in our range, okay, like our bluffs become a little bit less profitable, but our value hands actually become more valuable. And a hand like ace jack now beats ace 10. You know, and when we have a backdoor heart combo, and then when the jack of heart comes in, well, we've got more equity to bet with as well. So those cards, although they may not be great for 6-7 of clubs, they are great for some other parts of our range. So yeah, and that took me way less than 15 minutes, and I spoke for a lot of time through that as well, so I can stop this now. And that's just a real example of how you can take 10 to 15 minutes, look at your opponent's range. I know this was an easy spot, but you can take a board texture and very quickly work out, actually, I'm getting a lot of folds here on the flop and not a huge amount on the turn or river, so I'm going to make my bluffing part of my range bet the flop a lot, and then they're going to give up once they don't have any equity on the turn or the river. Or you may find a spot where it's like, I don't get loads of folds on the flop, but I get a ton on the river, so therefore I'm going to bet all of my hands with any kind of equity, so my backdoor flush draws, maybe bottom pair kind of hands on the flop, and maybe double barrel most of them on the turn, and then bet the river as well, because our opponent gets the river with a lot of second pair combos, missed flush draws, top pair, weak kicker. And this is a really cool activity because it gives you an opportunity on each street to really begin to visualize how you can exploit your opponent. There will be boards where it's not possible really to exploit your opponent, where it is a case of, wow, he actually has a lot of combos which are very strong here. It would not be an idea to try and exploit that by bluffing a lot. You can instead exploit that by strengthening your checking range, strengthening your betting range by saying, I'm only going to bet my strongest value hands and my really good semi-bluffing combos, which a lot of which can call a check raise anyway. So yeah, in the next episodes, if I just quickly have a look and see what we're doing, we're going to look at a number of board textures, and I think that this is going to be, there's going to be a lot of information in the next episode. We're going to be taking 10 board textures and looking at them from a few different situations. So it might be early position against mid position, or early position against button, early position big blind, whatever it is. We'll have a few different ones. And we'll look at that board texture and begin to work out who it hits better, and therefore how you can construct a strategy. You know, if, for example, it's this kind of board here, we've opened from early position, we're going to have a lot more strong ace X than our opponent in the small blind if they've managed to call from there. Whereas if it's a 6, 7, 9 two-tone board and we've opened early position and the button is called, the button's going to be a lot stronger there, and as a result, we can't begin just bluffing everything. So it's going to be an interesting episode. I hope you will enjoy that. I hope you enjoyed this one, and I hope you learned something from this one. And yeah, this has been Nick for PokerVIP.com, and I'll see you in the next episode.